too. Started and I have a headache.
You don't have time, like, I almost tried to say, are you bringing food?
Shut it off.
I can't stop, yeah.
Turn it off, didn't you?
But they say that 17,000 times.
On
And then,
screen.
Right here.
Oh.
yeah, I'll have it delivered. And I'm like, wait a second, I can't just get up and leave.
I can hear you breathing. Yeah.
Pat, my atomic clock. And say the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let Jerry introduce himself in a minute. Yes, the board needs the audience. Board also has questions. So, 5:30 to 7, and the second minute, 7:15 to 8:45. Then we have a meeting after that, non-public. Okay, Jerry, introduce yourself. Can every,
Can you all hear me if I speak?
I can hear you.
I'll go with that. If you can't, just let me know. My name is Jared Kisman. I grew up in Freiburg, Maine. Went to Freiburg Academy at the University of Maine at Farmington. Went on to get my master's degree. To be real honest, and I shared this with the board, I had no direction. I was not one of those guys like my wife was that had a direction since she was 5. I just kind of went to school to play sports and soccer, and I ended up being injured my senior year and not being able to play. And as a mentor, a great man that I know still, I said, you know, I'm kind of missed out. You know, I'm going to play my senior year, play in college, small college, you're not that good. And he was on it. So I ended up at UMaine Farmington and played there. And again, training days were coming to an end, and I really had the fever still to coach. And so he said, become a teacher. So I said, perfect. So I became a teacher. No plans, never started that way. It was a way to keep me in school. So I ended up getting hired at Mexico High School, which is a very small school, smaller than this one, actually. In Mexico, Maine, nearly the day before school started. And worked there for 8 years, I guess 9 years, and we merged with a school across the river. They were both Milltown, you know, rivalry, and so we merged with Brooklyn and came out Valley. So I enjoyed about 11 more years there as a high school economics teacher, they call it teacher. Met a woman far away in northern Maine, and on a whim, they had a position open Maine. I wasn't done my certification, but I was close, and it was in November, so they were desperate. So I applied there, and I got the job, and I started as assistant principal. A week after that, the principal came in and said, I should have told you, but I'm leaving for a superintendent's job. So you're kind of going to run the show. We'll get someone to come in to be the principal, make it all legal. So they hired this guy named Woody, a great guy. And I cut my teeth in this junior senior high school in Northern Maine. And as a principal, acting principal. From there, I went across town to an intermediate school. Architects were starting to get into everything. There were those crazy early years. And so nighttime and Valley in high school was just like that. So I went to the intermediate school for several years. I was also the GT coordinator during all that time. And then my wife, on a whim, who's done most everything, wanted to become a GT teacher. She knew that I needed to have a job downstate on the coast of Maine and doing it for her. And she applied, and I said, go ahead. She was high on the teaching thinking, although I wasn't sure if she could get the job. 5 minutes after she interviewed, she got the job. So the dilemma now was, we had a house in Oakland, and we need a house in Hampton, or Winterport. And so we searched around, we bought a house. I was originally, or last plan was, I was gonna live at my camp, and we were gonna rent the house, and then the kids in Carroll would be in Winterport. And literally again, right before school started, assistant principal in Belfast opened up, middle school. So I applied for that and got hired, which was very convenient. It was a great school, very, very progressive school, learned a lot. And that was when I decided I kind of wanted to be, my influence, my sphere of influence, I wanted it to be a little bit bigger. So I looked at the superintendent. So I was there in Belfast, and a job opened up about the same distance, but in the other direction. That was another middle school that was a municipal school, which is budgetarily a completely different animal. I feel so disconnected from 2018, so passed away. So I applied there and got that job as well. So I was there for 5 years. Learned a lot about a municipal school versus an SDU or an SED in Maine. And that was really cool. And then the last box I had to check off was I've been principal for grades 3 through 12. I've been a principal at all those levels. So to kind of pad my resume, I guess is the only way to say it. There was a job that opened up in Dexter, which was not too much further away, for a pre-K to 8 school, about 700 kids, 120 staff, pretty large place. But I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about early ed culture, early ed protocols, pedagogy. And then my wife, in January, my wife said, I need to be a curriculum coordinator, and I'm going to get a job somewhere. So I knew we were moving in January. So I started looking, and I found this place. So she actually was voted in last night for her job with me. So that brings me here. That's about it. Professionally, I have 3 children. One is a 6th grade teacher. One has a post-production sound engineering degree and works in the bank. Figure that one out. And my third one is a first-year student who's at UMaine, who also works in the schools and in tech, but also is part owner and works at a computer store and then goes to college full time. So he plays the drums. That's where I left off when I talked to you guys earlier. I like to hunt and fish, I like the outdoors. We travel, we have an RV. We travel around as much as we can.
So, the board want to ask questions first, or do we want to?
No, I think we could let other people ask it first. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, when you come up, give your name and what department you're from, so Amy probably knows, but, Jerry doesn't know. Okay? So, doesn't matter, go ahead.
Somebody's gonna be first.
Hello, I'm John Marco. I work here as a second shift custodian at night. I have like a 2-part question for you. What are the primary responsibilities of the custodial services, and how does this function support and enhance the educational services of the Milton School District?
My father-in-law was a long-time school custodian, and he always told me, when I first met him, he said, when you go to a new school, go to the bathroom. He said, you can tell the custodial staff, go to the bathroom. They'll tell you the whole story. And I think like any environment, custodial staff is integral to that. And, you know, no one wants to go to a school that's messy. No one wants to go to a school that has marks on the floor. No one wants to go to a school whose bathrooms aren't clean. So I find it kind of integral. If the environment is healthy and clean, you know, the school I'm at now, custodial staff are more like teachers. Kids know them by name, they call them by name, it's a very family-oriented place. So I see custodial staff as just part of the bigger web, right? Just part of the whole school community. But I think the services they provide are usually thankless. I try to be thankful for that. But I think they're also, like I said, very integral to the overall well-being of the school. Thank you.
You're an educator here at New Middle High School, and I also have a two-part question. First part is, how will you be addressing the low rate of pay for support staff, which consists of parents, office staff, and custodians? And how will you help to make New's rate of pay more competitive with other districts, which will help to retain our staff here?
Well, as I said, my father-in-law was a custodial position for forever. And I've worked at places where pay, and I understand your pay scale here is low, it's neighboring, for everyone, teachers, parents, custodial staff, I can only imagine. The research I've done says it's lower than companion school.
Right.
So the balance there is, obviously you reward good performance with good pay, because people want to be there. And I don't think money is everything, but it's about 90%. I think culture is a big part of it. I think, the feeling of family is a big part of it. So my job would be to balance that need between the taxpayer base and the overall budget, and I would use the word rewarding with staff with fair pay. That's a tricky balance, I'm sure you know. There are two competing entities there, right?
Yeah.
But if you're looking for where I sit on that fence, I am very much in favor of competitive pay for competitive service. And I think competitive pay draws competitive service, right? We have people all the time. My wife's district, former district, pays very well, but the surrounding schools pay very, very well. So they're the same boat, right? It's the same thing. But I think part of that equation is not just money, but it's fulfillment and what it feels like to work there. The other part is that fulfillment does not pay your mortgage, I guess. And so I think the other part is the balancing act. And, I would be an advocate for, like that, fair pay for fair wages. And recognizing that that's a but my goal would be to get this pay scale, all this pay somewhere down the road. I wouldn't make promises today, but somewhere down the road, equitable is not better. Which I have a point about that later about the school budget. But that's, as you know, it's a quandary, right? It's a balancing act, but I would certainly.
It always is.
Yeah. And even in, like I said, my wife's position, they pay very well. There's two applicants to that. So, my position would be, I, as a blanket statement, I'm not sure teachers are paid what they're worth anywhere.
Hi, I'm Beth Stevenson. I'm the sixth grade language arts and history here at New, going into my 23rd year of teaching. Sorry, I was
So you brought it up, that's okay.
prior. I'm sorry.
I said, it's okay, you brought it up.
How would you lead a school in need of academic improvement with limited resources, high turnover of staff, and a challenging budget?
Those are all things that are shared by a lot of districts. New is not, or I should say many districts. I think it's important to, one of the things I've found, maybe I'm going to skirt your question. One of the things I've found in my career is that raising expectations usually raises perception. I worked in a school in northern Maine where we had a relatively large native population. We had an incredibly poor high school dropout rate, and even worse if they went to any secondary education. I was at intermediate school, we stopped as a school, we only spoke in terms of college. So when we talk to kids, we would say, when you go to college, everything was college-based or tech school. But that was just the culture. We just changed the culture and the thought process. I mean, the kids that came in third grade, last sixth grade, were like, well, yeah, I'm mean, they don't know why or for what, but that was their mindset. And I think that's important. The monetary thing, you know, I mean, it's like anywhere, you have to squeeze the most bang for your buck out of the money that you have, but no one has enough money. I think that's an integral part of this position, is figuring out where do those limited resources go. Turnover rate, I'm not sure what the causes are, if it's, I mean, I can ask you, do you feel it's solely pay, or is it morale, or?
I can only speak for the middle school, in my experience. I've heard it's a combination of, it's a myriad of issues that the district is facing, which is not unique to other districts, but it's definitely more predominant here, which is a reflection of the community.
Yeah, I have some community development questions that maybe you might answer in that here. But I'll ask you, since you're here, a couple of them. One of the questions that the board presented was that there was some negativity among the community members. And I would ask you or everyone, where is that rooted? Where does that come from? And maybe it's not a fair question for you, but.
Towards negativity towards the school district itself?
Yeah. Or the district, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, it's probably not one unique thing. So I think all the things I just mentioned would lend itself to not painting a great picture. High turnover of staff, low test scores, limited resources where, you know, the kids come home and our school doesn't have as much extracurricular choices as other schools for kids to do things. And like you said, 90% of it is because of money and the town doesn't want to invest. So it's a reciprocal situation that's happening and we see that it's our kids suffering as a result. And it's a big problem. And it's not fair to our kids that they can go anywhere and other school districts offer more choices. So, they're not as invested in their academics, if you will, because there's not other carrots to dangle for our kids to be invested, if that makes sense.
It does, and I just want, again, referencing my notes from earlier, but, I talked to Earl today on the phone about the movement of sending tuition kids out to middle school, high school. And I think, why don't we just make this a school where other people want to send their kids and take their tuition money? Again, it was a question about small schools, I'm going to flexibility. I don't want to answer all my questions before I get there.
Yeah, no, I think you.
You know, it's never easy. You know that, you've been around long enough. It's never easy, but I think that when you put people together with common problems, you find a solution. Part of my background is finding a solution. There are tons of daunting things in these schools every day. So my answer would be to change the mindset of anyone who has a different mindset than this professor. And that's not going to be quick. That's not going to be tomorrow. But I think that's the work that we have in front of us. What I think.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary Ann Jones. Have been in the school district 35 years. Yeah. Also taught in Marshall, Maine, very first year. So I know the county very well. So my question kind of also is in part. Can you clearly define the roles and the relationship between you as superintendent, business administrator, and the school board? And then the second part is how would you convey your expectations to your administrators, staff, teachers, school board in regards to their roles and their responsibilities?
The bottom line, to answer your first part, the bottom line is I work for them. My job, I see my job as counselor. My job is to have the expertise where I have it, and to bring it to them and say, this is who we are, this is where we need to go, this is how we should get there. And I think my experience has been, my experience has been an open conversation with all the stakeholders, not just me, or media administrators or media teachers, but with everybody. There's this transparency that we're all in this together. Here's what I know, here's what I don't know. So I see that relationship as being 50-50. In the end, I work for them. And I will be that soldier, and when someone says, oh, this is what's gonna happen, then that's what's gonna happen. Could you repeat the second part?
Second part is, how are you going to convey all your expectations to the administrator, staff, teachers, school board in regards to their roles and responsibilities? Because you're gonna have a dual role, and how are you gonna get all that?
Yes. I probably am guilty for over-communication. I write tons of emails, I make tons of phone calls. I enjoy the interaction between people and conversations, whether it be digital or face-to-face or Zoom. And I think that's key to being a successful leader. Everybody needs to know where you're coming from, what you're all about, and should say, I don't think you're right. You know, I'm not too keen on that, which is great, because that makes everybody grow. But that would be my approach to communication. Be transparent and open. I don't have agendas, I don't have an ego to say, you know, just, I think I'm a pretty going guy, and can have communication and conversations to move people forward. And when you lead people off, when people are on the ditch and you're driving the bus by, that's when you get into trouble. Because eventually the bus is empty, you're driving it to my analogy. Are you?
Thank you.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Bob Bond, the Special Ed Director for the district. So what are some of the most important concerns and issues surrounding the decision to make a placement of a student out of district? And how would that process go?
It always comes down to the best interest, not to be too cliche, right? But it's always about that. And I understand the financial responsibilities, the financial anchors that go with that, but that's why we're here, right? You can't serve a child, and that's your task, then you need to find another avenue for those services. And again, back to the conversation, because I think we have data-driven information, data-driven decision-making, and all the actors on board. Now, we may not all agree, but we can all build consensus, right? It may not be my perfect plan, but if it's gonna work with the child, and we can get people on board, that's what you do. That's a very quaint answer, and I'm sorry for that, but that's where I come from, that's what you do. You take care of it. Thank you.
Did everybody get to ask? Emily?
One of the questions I had, you sort of answered in part while you were answering other questions, so I don't want to be, too repetitive. Okay. I'm wondering if you have, an idea of a plan or a clear plan about how to become competent as both, business administrator and superintendent. It's a big role, so.
So for 3 years, my wife's in a doctor's program, and I hear about it every day. And I live it every Monday and Tuesday afternoon. But, so for years, I wanted to get my MBA, and I think that this is a perfect excuse to get it. I think I told you last time we met that I looked at the qualifications or certifications for business administrative certificate in New Hampshire, and I'm in 2,000. So I can go that route easily, but my economics background and my school law and my school finance background, I'm on the list. But I am definitely, Tom's College in Waterville is a great online and very well nationally respected. So I easily do that. When I read that question here, I'm like, oh, there's my answer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
I enjoy furthering my education. It's very pertinent to me right now, if that was a job. Yeah.
and you feel comfortable sort of, you know, obviously there's a lot of responsibilities as superintendent, but for me, it's sort of carrying that vision and, you know, bringing along with you, people along with you. You feel comfortable doing that well.
Yeah, I really do. When I talked to someone the first time, he said, you know, superintendent, this is BA. And I said, okay. And so I, for an hour or so, I stumbled on that. I had the chops for that. And I researched what it's all about, and very super comfortable with all of it. And when I don't know, I'll learn, you know, and that's what we do. The other thing was that I noticed, you know, carrying the vision of the district and the superintendent responsibilities and the BA responsibilities, they're all the same. I mean, they're interwoven. And it's, you know, I think they go hand in hand. And so, although there's different hats, those hats move a lot, you know what I mean? So that is not daunting to me at all.
Good. Thank you. Somebody else want to ask?
Melissa? Yes.
I do have a question, and it goes towards where, I have it written down right here, in a second. One of the benefits of a small school system overall would be the teachers being involved with their students and having a good relationship with their students. And I think giving the teachers a voice. How do you plan on working effectively with the teachers to give them more of a voice on the vision of the school system?
Good question. I think I told you, I said, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself or not, but, you know, all of us are smarter than one of us, right? I am not a leader on high who will send victims down for my services to figure out, right? That's not my model. I'm more collaborative than that. And I really enjoy giving power. It's kind of scary for teachers once in a while. Quick story, we had, again, 700 something kids in 9 grade level buildings. And my second year at Ridgeview, I said to them, look, you know, because they were like, oh, we can't do this, we can't do this. You know what? Here's your special time. Here's your lunch. Take your own schedule. I'm totally fine with it. And you would think they'd like, oh, thank you. They're free. You know, they didn't know what to do because they had so much power. So we worked through that a little bit, and as we got going in the process, they embraced that power, and they embraced that voice, and they became much more better practitioners, not just teachers, but just practitioners. So I'm a shared leadership guy, for sure. And I don't know, I mean, I know, but I don't know what a second grade teacher goes through every day here. I hope to learn, but why not solicit that input and that help? It sounds foolish for me not to.
Okay, what else?
I have one more.
Go ahead.
Not all students are auditory processing students, and we do have a large special ed population. How do you see being able to engage a variety of students who can't all sit in the traditional auditory classroom and learn? What can we do to engage all of our students?
I believe firmly, and this is what makes all my decisions, this is the basis of my decision. All students can learn. All students. They learn at different rates, at different times, and in different ways. And if we plan everything we do for kids with those 4 things in mind, it's when we forget and we start, you know, cookie cutter delivery to kids who maybe aren't auditory, or maybe don't have attention span, or can't sit down at the desk. You know, we have a lot of stand-up desks, because kids can't do it. There's a myriad of what you would think would be barriers to educational pursuit or educational process. They really aren't big things. You know, I had a teacher say, "You won't sit still." I said, "Let them stand up." And she's like, "Can I do that?" "Oh, of course you can. Let it stand up." So, you know, those 4 premises that I mentioned, that's what drives my practice. And you know what? If I don't make the benchmark in November, okay, don't make it in January. If I don't make it in January, then maybe I'll make it in realize a great folly we have in this country, and it's many civilized countries, is that we've just placed these artificial barriers, these artificial restrictions on kids and learning, and they just don't work anymore. They just don't. I mean, do you have an hour of your day at home where you do just your math stuff? You just do the checkbook, you just do math, and then another hour in your day where you do all your writing and all your emails? I guess not, right? Why do we teach that? So, for me, it's it's a bigger question than just a learning style or maybe perhaps a disability. It's the whole philosophy of how are we doing this? Is this the right way, or is this the best way? So I focus on those kinds of questions. I told you before I was a positive disruptor in school, ask a lot of why questions, but it just seems to me that there's so much room for improvement and to further those kids' success. We're blind to. We're not. I don't mean to be negative. I don't mean teachers are, administrators are. I just mean overall, nobody just sat down and started talking about that. So that's my mission. That's what I would do to staff.
Abigail? Peg?
Hi. I have to be very honest, Jerry, everything that you said, last interview, blah, blah, I have no problem with seeing you as a superintendent. However, I still have concerns with the business manager position.
Yep.
I'm the school board rep on the budget committee, so have been working very, very closely with the current business manager, our
Yep.
business administrator. And I guess I'm just throwing that out there, that looking through, yes, you've got some economics background. I have an MBA, I have some economics background, but to me, I had an awful lot of learning to do when I came on the school board and was going to be part of the budget committee. So I guess my first question really is, can you talk more about how you plan on handling the financial side of the whole position?
Can you give me more specific? I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay. Every single month we get our revenue report, our grant report, blah, 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 this and that. I know the business administrator works very closely with administration, as far as budgeting. You've got a budget, you want to buy something, okay, you need to go through this particular process, blah, blah, blah. All sorts of state required reports that, I still don't get some of those. So there's an awful lot of background that goes into the business manager side of this position. And I just,
Can I ask you what you use for software for your?
yes, Infinite Visions,
Okay, so we use ProFund at our building.
Okay.
So ProFund, I'm sure, like Infinite, is layered, and everybody has their kind of role, and there's a pathway for things like work requisitions and accounting and all that stuff. So my role is not at the top end of that, and Kevin's role, but I understand that role, and I understand the platform, I just don't have need to be in that end of it. I looked at your monthly financials, I looked at your budget, I have it copied here. None of that's foreign to me, and yeah, will there be a learning curve? Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you that I'm gonna come in here and know everything, but I will tell you that I'll come in here and know enough to ask.
Okay. Okay. And you are pursuing, or you are thinking of pursuing your MBA?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, one of the other things for this combined position, superintendent kind of, runs the whole district, quote unquote. Financial manager reports to the superintendent. How are you going to balance both of those roles that you know, your left side is gonna be the financial person and the right side is gonna be the superintendent. Wants to buy something, do something, spend some money, and maybe the financial, your left side is going, I don't know. So, I mean, I just had several concerns, I'm sorry.
I hear you. You know, in my experience, in my training, in my year and a half intern, those situations were kind of the same. In my experience with other, except for very large positions, they were budgeted, and that was acceptable. And I think there's schools in your surrounding areas that are
In the state.
and we're all, you know, back and forth, they won't have time. I don't, again, I'm not gonna tell you that I'm 100% prepared. That just wouldn't be accurate. I have enough background, I have enough experience, I'm totally okay with technology, and it would be a learning curve, but I have great faith that I can do it. I understand your concern, I really do. And I don't wanna come off as cocky, but I feel confident.
You could work with me.
I can work with anybody. If you have an MBA, I might be working for you.
Okay,
Let
great.
that go.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate your answers and your honesty.
Now, my question is, and it's a little on what Peg said, you're gonna have a dual job. Now, are you gonna be available 24/7?
I am now, to be honest with you. I need to tell you something. I talked to Mr. Sussman the other day. So what I didn't disclose, and I didn't think I needed to, and it didn't come up, but speaking of availability, my dad is 96 years old and took very ill, early April. So I haven't been in my building physically since April break for us. That did not stop my responsibilities, however. But it did come up, and I said, you know, I didn't say that. I don't think it's got a bearing, but should I disclose that? He said, yeah, be transparent. So in terms of 24/7, yeah, I live on my phone. My wife has a policy of not letting anything go 24 hours without a response. Mine's like 2. Usually I'm there to pick up the phone, or I'm just I'm doing something, I'll play with that. But again, my communication style is pretty constant and lifetime. So yeah, I mean, that's what you do. If I'm on vacation in July in my camper, and you want to call me, you're going to call me, and I'm going to answer your call.
So will you be available when you need it? Call you, I can text you at 2 o'clock in the morning because I've done it several times.
Wait, say it again, I'm sorry.
I have text my superintendent 2 o'clock in the morning.
I'm not going to be honest, I'm going to be honest with that, I may not hear it, but I'll put the phone on her side, if that's what you want. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you should be calling probably the police or fire. But I would respond as quick as I got it.
So you'll be making decisions, canceling school because of weather and,
5 o'clock in the morning, please.
early.
4:45?
Well, we call it about 4:30 at school, but the district is so big, we have teachers that have never had a snow day because they leave so early and they live so far in the woods, for lack of a better term, that they're halfway to school before the message comes out. They're like, man, I'll just go in now, might as well go. So, yeah. No, those, early mornings are tough.
Anybody else in the audience have any more questions? Go ahead. I don't.
My name's Andrea Corso, and I'm the secretary of the elementary school, and welcome. And I just wanted to ask a question, because I wasn't even sure. I already know they're putting in 2 positions for you, but was Mr. Sussman a curriculum coordinator also? Because we lost Mary Wilson at one time. I just want to know who's going to be picking up, now that he's the business administrator / superintendent, does he also know that the curriculum coordinator has no one? We have no one for that either?
Well,
In our district?
Want me to answer that, or what? Andrew, I know in the beginning, when we split from Wakefield, and decided not to hire a full-time curriculum coordinator.
Right.
I know Earl said he was going to do it,
Correct.
because I was very much involved in my teaching position with curriculum. I offered my services several times, and I was never called, I was never involved, I was never anything. So I know administration teachers have been doing the curriculum piece of it, which, I mean, their input is extremely, extremely important. But my honest opinion is that the superintendent is in charge overall of curriculum and making sure that the curriculum is implemented, it's a good curriculum, and everything that you've said about teaching to students, whatever their learning style is also incorporated in whatever curriculum is finally decided on the school. Is
Well, I
that,
know it's always been a position, like we did, all the years
Right.
I've been here, with somebody handling that, so I was just wondering where it wasn't, you know, it's not really publicized, it's like, to me, that's another position in itself. So I just wanted to make sure he was aware that that's also, because I think it's important, I mean, I know teachers do it on their own, but someone should be able to see it. And I just want to know if he is aware that that's also going to be something he has to do, because it was Mr. Sussman's job, correct? And then, so I don't know.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Or speak to it, I don't know what to answer. But even with the curriculum coordinator, and we have one in my district, in my school, ultimately it falls on the superintendent. Anyway, and speaking of teachers, I've been looking for an informed kind of feedback to make those decisions. Again, won't be overnight, but I'd like to see what you have, see what you're doing. Your curriculum is aligned, which is a good thing. I've checked that out. But in terms of improvement or, switching textbook series, which, we may or may not do down the road, but that, again, that's it might be a New Hampshire thing, I don't mean to mislead anybody, but these things don't look to me, from my experience, as being additional stuff. Even if you have a curriculum coordinator and they do great stuff, and my wife's one, it ultimately still comes down to what, right? So I would work with administrators to make that curriculum work. I can't tell you that I'd be at every curriculum meeting, or I'd be at every grade level meeting planning, the lineage alignment, but yeah, that would be an overseeing.
Well, just where our district is, like, teachers talk about how low our test scores are and everything, I was just concerned that, where and who.
My curriculum direction would be wide.
Okay.
Right, that's where I would start.
Yep.
I'm not gonna throw another textbook series in or teach, but you have data, you use the data. Where are you involved? Where do you go? We have, in my building, it was there long before me, but we have a third grade class. And our first, kindergarten, first, second, rock stars. Every kid in second grade leaves at or above that, no matter where they start. Every kid. Then you go to third grade. So we looked at, do test changes between second and third, read to you anymore. Is that a cause? Is it a physical cause? Is there in a different part of the building, could have blockers, right? So the whole responsibility piece goes up. Is it a social system? Is it curriculum? Is it teachers? Is it schooling? And in the 4 years I was there, we turned that upside down. We still have no answer. To this day, we do not know why that happened. And it starts at the 4th grade and 6th, again, regardless of staff, regardless of whether we're using the curriculum we have now or the curriculum we had 6 years ago. Business starts coming up, 7 and 8, they leave on grade level.
I just think where the middle school is over here, I just think that somehow there should be, we always try to have the curriculum kind of going together with, because I hear a lot from parents that once they leave the 5th grade, kind of, the curriculum doesn't click together.
Yep.
So I just, I think that's kind of a problem sometimes. And I don't know myself, I'm not a teacher, so I have no idea what's missing, but I was just wondering if it's something you would look at.
I think alignment would be the first question I would look at as we go through the lineage.
Okay. Because I still think 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is like grammar school, elementary, it should be kind of close together. appreciate it, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a little question.
I'm here.
Okay, me too.
I have no plan.
I think we talked about before, and we kind of mentioned it tonight, that Milton is small, but really that's a good thing, and we see it as an advantage, and I would agree. But I'm curious if you could elaborate maybe a little on what you think is the advantage of being a small school.
Yes, I appreciate it. Small is good. We have a school not far, well, it is far from my house, but the main term is not very far, called the airline school. And the airline school sits in the middle of Blueberry Terrace, between Callis and Beck. Has 45 kids. How many get that out? 45 kids, K to 8. And it's a magical place to go. Go there, you're like, really? I mean, everybody knows everybody, obviously. Everybody's there for everybody. The community's there. You do this fundraising supper, and not that the community is that big, but everybody's there. And it just speaks, I don't know, wax pathetic, but it just speaks to Americana. You know, it's just like that's the Rockwell world we all want to live in. So I think small has a lot of advantages. When I worked in Mexico, we had our one wing of the building, and it was a two-wing building, was the high school, one wing was the building. And then the other half was Cap and Gym. But we were family. You know, those kids are still on my field. They have kids graduating right now. But, you know, there are things that, and I can attest to it being in a big building now, no matter how much you try, there are things that you cannot replicate when you get to a certain size. They work, same thing. They're just things you can't do. And relationships you can't build. You alluded to relationships, and I think that is by far the key to any education, or any successful education. So it's small, you know, we should embrace small. It's okay. We have tons of freedoms. We want to do something Tuesday, it's not going to screw up 600 other people. You know what I mean? It's really cool. I worked with a school in St. Clement in Hertfordshire, England. Went to visit a couple times, they came to us, and they have a thing, they have a headmaster, the headmaster feels like it, they just call it headmaster day. They just don't go to school. It's the coolest thing, and it's chill, nobody cares, kids love it, and it's just and I'm not proposing that right here, but it's just a bit, you know what I mean? It's just a very different system for sure. It's just a very neat thing to be able to have that freedom, that ability to do what you want to do. And you know, again, when I talked earlier about making the schools a place that other towns want to send their kids to, we have several schools in Maine, a couple charters, but some not, that are very small, and they're so different, they're so free to do what they want to do. That they attract kids, and kids want to go there, and they limit their incoming class because they don't want to be big. So, you know, Great Salt Bay School, if you get it on the internet, just check it out. The real schools and so I don't see that as a detriment at all.
Thank you.
Ed?
Prior to myself moving into this town, which is about 6 years ago, it was my understanding that Newt had an incredible band. They had a lot of extracurricular activities. Now, there's almost none. When I moved here, my children were in the elementary school, and one of the things that was wonderful was they would have after-school activities. And it could be a teacher playing Legos, or, I mean, one of them was learning to ride a unicycle. But it was something the kids could do that was different after school. And now they're up here. And this is a small town, there's not much for kids to do. What about your feeling on implementing not just sports, but extracurricular activities that engages the students, whether it be riding a unicycle or playing soccer? I mean,
I have a friend that's a very well-known educator and speaker. He lives in California, and when he moved to California from Ohio, he literally chose where to move based on the extracurricular activities. He researched all the activities, all the non-athletic stuff, and That's where we chose to live, because that's the life and blood of the school, and yeah, you're right. And my only caveat to that is, as you know, anything like that, at least at some point, takes money. For example, do you have transportation after school if they stayed for a chess club?
They did at the elementary school, I remember that.
It was a grant,
But
it was a grant to run the after-school program, and then because it was so successful, the board put it in as part of our, budget money for the after-school program too. So it was a combination, started off with a grant and then was able to incorporate it into, yes, 21st century grant, yeah.
So, I mean, there are options that we need to explore, because I agree, school isn't about books and 75 days. It just can't be. You know, life is a string of moments, right? We're stringing along moments, and some good, some bad, but that's what it is. And I think the more moments we can create that are positive, the more beneficial to these kids and learn. So, yeah, I mean, I want to go to math class, but if I have just to go after school, right? Or if I, really want to play the guitar, those are, with a little bit of grease, with a little bit of time, a little bit of money, those are good. And I think they're crazy important.
I think one of the problems I think we're having here is, we're having trouble getting bus drivers, we're having trouble getting janitors. I think, and also not just that, it goes up through the ranks, and I think every school is having that same problem. And I have to be honest, I think the money we get from the town, we try to spend as wisely as we can. So, the way we're gonna improve stuff is get more money.
Right. I think, again, back to the quandary we talked about earlier, it's all about how much money do you have and where's your return coming from, right? What's most important? So, I mean, that's part of the deal, that's part of the school, right? That's part of your job, that's part of my job, is where do we allocate these things? What's important? I think there's a lot of room. And again, we talked about culture. We started an after-school program, tutorial, basically, for kids. I have 10, 11 or 12, so 10 full-time that stay after school for an hour and a half, 2 days a week.
We got some teachers that do that.
Yeah, and I think, again, culturally, that's the thing you develop, it doesn't cost them, right? They see a value in it, and that value is rewarded. I send them cards of thanks all the time, and they might have some coffee on their desk someday. But there are a lot of tangible things that don't.
But I think this last year has been one of the worst years for education, or even across the country. And I think we as a district, and I disagree with a lot of people, I thought we did real good. And it was because of our staff. Okay?
I agree. Our staff.
And when I say staff, I mean from the very bottom all the way to the top. The janitors had to keep these buildings clean, the bus drivers, the secretaries, the paras, I mean.
We delivered lunch on 9 school buses.
We did an excellent job of that.
And we had ed techs that were not paid, that would come and ride.
And a lot of schools in the area failed to do that. And we did it under our leadership. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
I have another one.
Go ahead.
I think,
Quiet last night, spent the whole week thinking stuff.
I did. One of the avenues I think that we have missed with the district is cross-teaching. We have a greenhouse. Small, but we have a greenhouse. And we have teachers who are very much into plants and whatnot, where that could be taught across several different classes. Science portion of it, the English portion of it, where you're writing a paper. The math portion is there. And we built a wonderful wood shop. And somebody like me who was never good at math, had I been taught how to do angles, doing something like that, maybe I would have gotten it.
And I think that's something that our district has missed, is that cross-teaching. It's taking the assets that we already have in our teachers and utilizing them across a bunch of topics. And for the kids really, like you said, sitting in a math class, do you see that being a possibility in a district, especially a small district, to be able to cross-teach like that?
Yes, it's a possibility no matter how big you are. I think the airline school is a great example of that. They're multi-grade, multi-level, and multi-content all at once. When I was, not when I was in Belfast, because it's still there, but in Belfast, we had a thing called the Garden Project, which was, it's nationally known, Google it, where we had 2 hoop houses in a 3/4 acre garden, and we had teams of kids. One of them was the ocean team, because they worked, we were on the ocean. They did oceanographic stuff, and one was the garden club. And the garden team of those 4 teachers ran the garden project. And they did everything from tilling, to planting, to selling the crops, to developing a line of heirloom seeds that they would sell at the farm stand. They developed their own composting, they developed their own heater for the outdoor classroom by tons of tin cans, black case, convection. It was crazy. Those were the kids that needed that. Those were the kids that conventional learning or sitting in front of the TV for 45 minutes just wasn't thinking. So I think those kinds of things, both hands-on learning and multi-content learning, is critical. Because it's just, it worked then, right? It worked for you, it worked for me, because whatever, that was the expectation. I don't know what the history is, but that's what I did. They told me to do that, I went to that. But kids today are gaining through their experience, their life experience, gaining autonomies that they think are like, that's good, they're like, why don't you do that? And sometimes I don't have an answer. You know, they just don't. Do I need to know? No, but you need to know how to reason. You need to know how to think. You need to know how to work collaboratively. You need to know how to find answers you don't know. That's why we teach math. We don't teach math. Some people do. My friends that are in the Navy probably do. Merchant Marines probably do. But it's still just skills with the content. And that's more important, I think. I really do.
Everything else, still don't have anything?
Very thorough.
Okay?
No, I asked mine, I mean, I don't know if you have any, I do have a mouse under here. If you have anything that you want to add, that you feel as though either you didn't share with us last time, or?
Well, actually, the questions were great, because when I laughed, I'm like, I wish I had asked that, I wish I had said that, because I didn't have to jump it off. So the questions really helped, and I answered most of what you said, whether you asked them correct or not. No, I think, here's the deal. I am what you see. Right? There's no pretense, there's no, as I mentioned earlier, no ego. I love what I do. I think it's important work. And I, rather than getting up in age and thinking I'm getting close to the end, I keep looking for the apogee. I keep looking for, when do I think I'm going to get there? I'm not even close. So, like I said, I have a very background. I think it's a good one. And I have still a lot to learn. That's it.
Anybody else?
You're looking at me.
That's it. Yes? Sure. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for your time.
You need,
I'll try to make it this time.
well, I can walk you out.
I'm gonna do it.
Just come back. We don't wanna find you here tomorrow
I
morning.
know, it's stuck on the wall somewhere. Thank you.
Jerry. Thank you so much.
Bye. I was gonna walk.
What time's the next one?
You differentiate from him. He's gonna walk.
7:15. Next one is at 7:15.
But we can eat.
Can we eat?
We're hangry.
What?
We're hangry.
Keep us in a good mood for,
We need our
for
pizza.
Tim.
Go get your pizza. Got plenty, oh, it's over there already.
Hey, was that planned with Andrea Cosa? Is that planned to the end of your career?
No clue. I have no, well, I was reading what Jen said, you know, the ESSER grant thing you
The big one or
made.
the little one?
Big one that she sent today, the $1 billion one.
Oh, my first meeting.
And-
Have you ever had the seats up? 3 years, Tammy, I'm gonna bring it up for 3 years.
I sent you a.
Really?
Okay,
You.
anyway, I'm just reading what she was saying, oh my God, look at, which one is?
my arm is killing me. Same one we got last time. Isn't that good? Very good.
You're not all leaving, are you? Okay, because you're not done.
We're going for a walk.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah.
that's the other one. I ate a big dinner.
Anybody like a piece of pizza?
I want to see the restrictions on it.
Thank you.
No, thank you, appreciate it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I'll eat it all.
No, what, the well-being and stuff for the kids.
Smart.
And,
Are you being recorded while I'm eating?
I mean, after
Feels uncomfortable.
activities, to me, that is,
Phone number, phone.
Are we being recorded while we eat?
that
Oh, yeah, because
at
you can't stop it because then it'll do 2 separate.
helping
So we're
kids
publicly being the watch TV. Yeah. Yeah,
whatever, what's memory?
yeah.
See, pay,
Oh, there's your lady?
we got that
Tesla lady?
grant, okay? That was a lot of money too. That ended off
Are we maybe being recorded?
20.
That's what I'm saying. No, you just told me. Timmy, did you
Hey,
get
Earl?
that email from
Yeah,
Dan?
Hey, you're back?
The
We're
scan.
not started yet, but you're back on.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I actually.
okay, I
was-
wondered what happened to my sound.
What? But I knew she
You were
would.
afraid that they're all,
Have it, 'cause
I'm excited they're all on here, listening.
A couple of the things that I had, actually,
They were afraid that
I had it wrong.
what was being said
Good thing I had.
after we discontinued wouldn't be appropriate. They shut it down.
People wanted to hear, listen to us either, so.
Yes,
They can watch us eat. Unfortunately, they get to watch us eat.
yeah. As soon as some other people come back, we can start. It's up to the board. I'm not gonna start without them.
Down the hall.
It'd be nice.
I'm gonna go get some, I think they're down the hall.
That's what I thought Carrie did.
Oh, does Carrie go get them?
Went that way, I don't know.
Yeah, that's where they are, down there.
Okay.
Made it, yes, everybody's here, we can. Now remember, ladies, don't rustle your, shuffle your
I'll be
paper,
shuffling.
because they can't hear.
Every time
You want to say something bad about Tammy?
Let me shuffle. There's no proof. That's what I do.
Not shuffling, I'm folding. That's why you see me when I'm just changing my page so that it doesn't, oh, Andy, so respectful. Oh, that's right, I was gonna take 1 minute. No, do not film. Good thing I brought my sweater, I'm cold. And I'm getting cold, thanks for putting it in my head. I blame you. Hey, so Bob and I did go train on that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah?
Are you proficient? Need to go train again, 'cause you all set?
Sure, I took notes.
Well, it'll be up to the board, we can discuss it.
And Bob recorded it too.
Well, we can discuss that, and
Yeah.
the thing that would prevent us doing it would be Earl, that's what the board wants to do.
What?
Mm.
So,
What?
go to the town hall.
Then I can walk across the street.
And we're just waiting for one more person.
Me.
And we can get started.
Well, I will say it again, I mean, what I keep hearing from the school board is we can be together rather than like this, and we can't. I mean,
Can't be together.
Yeah, but it's a closer room, it's. I agree.
yeah, but
That's,
I mean, we had somebody there, somebody there, somebody there,
yeah, but
Just
it's still,
yeah.
smaller than this.
Everybody's here. Does everybody want to start early? So everybody can get.
Sure.
All right. You're in charge, everybody. I'm just running. Okay. All right, Tim, you want to explain who you are and where you're from and for everybody?
Sure. So my name is Tim Comerian. I live in Alton, and also, well, I lived in New Hampshire many years, but I only lived in Alton for about the past year. Lived there with my wife and 2 kids, although one is off to college. And you know, I've worked for now 22 years, particularly in the field of special education, and of the last 15 as a district level special ed administrator. But sort of parallel to that, I went through a CAGS program in educational leadership with a focus on the superintendency, and just completed that. So sort of where my professional journey has taken me, and very interested in hopefully being the right fit for.
Now, would the audience like to start again? Would want to do it that way?
Sure, that worked well.
John, I think you were up first. You ate your food, now you can go first.
Hello, I'm John Marcoux. I work as a custodian here on the second shift. And I just have a 2-part question for you. What are the primary responsibilities of the custodial services, and how does this function support and enhance the educational services of the Milton School District?
So, you know, I wholeheartedly believe that there are support staff whose job in a school district is essential to the running of the school district. Custodians being one of them. I think part of it is that, you know, in addition to obviously sort of the keeping our, you know, facilities clean, and sort of basic health needs, obviously, I think it works towards sort of the pride, that the district has, and shows in its students and its staff, as those individuals, you know, work very hard to, you know, keep the facilities, and allow the students to be proud of the school that they're in. And so, you know, I think they're vital to the community as a whole. Like other support staff, like professionals and administrative assistants, you know, everybody has a piece to the puzzle of making sure that the school runs the way it should.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carrie Rio. I'm a paraeducator here at New Middle High School. I have a 2-part question also. How will you be addressing the low rate of pay for support staff, which consists of paras, office staff, and custodians? And how will you make New's rate of pay more competitive surrounding districts so that way we can retain more of our staff?
Well, I think part of the first job of that is, you know, it's always important to sort of come to the table when you talk about, you know, negotiations with, you know, with whatever staff, whether or not it's a, you know, bargaining unit staff or a non-bargaining unit staff, and you need to come to the table in good faith to try to, you know, do what you can to be able to improve working conditions. And to me, working, you know, salary and sort of compensation is part of that for particularly paraprofessionals who, I've had many years working with paraprofessionals who, you know, oftentimes have the hardest job in terms of working with our most needy students, and we need to value the work that they do. So I think first and foremost, I would need to make sure that I gather information about what are those rates, you know, in other districts, you know, and, you know, I think one of the things that we want to recognize is that we're not going to probably get immediately to where we want to be, but if we can make at least small steps towards that, I think that's really ultimately what we want to do, is we want to make progress toward that end goal of being more competitive. Again, I don't know how those rates currently compare to other districts, but I know regardless of the districts I've worked in, the rate of pay has not been what we wanted it to be for those individuals. So I certainly would work with that group to be able to figure out sort of what are our short-term objectives, what are our long-term objectives.
Thank you.
How about, I'm the special ed director for the district. And this one should be in your wheelhouse. As superintendent, what are the most important concerns when you're making a decision about placing a student out of district, and how do you see that process going?
So, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to make a decision based on what's most good for that student. There's a lot of variables that come into play when you decide that for a student. But first and foremost, it's a team decision, and there are any number of different roles that are at the table who have bring their own expertise to the table in putting all of that information together to make that decision. I think it's, we never want to make that decision lightly. I think we want to try to do as much as we can and problem solve and come up with some possible viable solutions internally, even if it means continually trying some things out. But there are times where that it doesn't work out, and we need to find another setting for that child. And what's most important is that we find, just like we want to find the right fit for what the program is, if we have a student internally, we want to find that same right fit for a student if in fact we have to go externally to find a program for them. So we want to make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure it's the right one for that student. But, our experience has been, we can avoid that, but not always. And, I think we just have to work together to figure out, most importantly, what's right for the student. And obviously we have to sort of figure out the funding piece, given the fact that usually it's an unintended, it can be an unintended cost in the middle of the year, so then we have to process all that. But first and foremost, it's the student.
Sure.
My name is Beth Stevenson. I'm a sixth grade teacher here at the middle school, English and history. I've been in education for 23 years. My question is, what is your vision for addressing a school and academic need of improvement, or school district in need of improvement for multiple years, with limited resources, low income, high turnover of staff, morale, culture, all those, lovely sentiments sprinkled in there. What would be your short-term plan for addressing some of that?
So, I think just like anything, when we have, short and long-term goals that we need to work toward, because whether or not you're a school or district in need of improvement or you're not, there's always room for improvement. And I think, I think the first thing that you need to do is, as a district, come together and figure out what is sort of the end goal. Where do we want to be, in a year, 3 years, 5 years? And ultimately, we need to bring the stakeholders together that sort of have a stake in that decision. And we need to look at what are, again, the outcomes, but also what are sort of the short-term benchmarks that will get us there. One of the things that, will be important, although funding, I don't want to make it sound like it's unimportant, but I do think that there are things that schools and districts can do, to make improvements that don't necessarily connect to funding, but there are obviously some pieces that will. So I think part of that plan is how do we leverage the resources that we have, in creative ways, whether or not it be not just budget funds, but maybe, grant funds or other sources of funds to be able to, meet the goal that plan that we want to set forth to get there. Because we want to make sure that you're not just, from a philosophical standpoint, coming up with those short and long-term goals, but you also have the means to get there. So I do think that we need to pull everybody together and you need to have that vision of where you want to be. And then you talk about, what are those things to get there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann Jones. I've been in the district for 35 years, and I'm over at Milton Elementary School. Can you clearly define the role and relationship between you as the superintendent business administrator to the school board, and then how do you convey your expectations to any administrator in the district, teachers, staff, and school board regards to their roles and responsibilities?
So, although not in the role of superintendent, but I certainly have worked with, school boards for a number of years in the roles that I've been in, and have sort of seen relationships, between superintendents and school boards, some of which have been, healthy and some of which have not been so healthy. And I think part of what is essential to that relationship is, sort of a give and take and a partnership. I fully believe that, I am here to provide, support and guidance, but at the same time, the board also, in a reverse way as well, is here also to provide that same support and guidance in a different way from the other side. So, I think again, it's a partnership. And in terms of my relationship with administrators, I've worked with many administrators over the years, some in more of a collegial relationship, some in more of a supervisory. But even in ones that were supervisory in nature, I, in a sense, see it as, there are supervisory requirements, but at the same time, it needs to be as much of a coaching relationship, so I'm here to support them in being able to do the work that they're doing in the schools. Whether or not that means, support for making a decision, whether or not that means, again, coming back to if there's something that they need, how do we again leverage those funds to be able to essentially get them what they need. But ultimately that again is a partnership as well, because we want ultimately together our goal is to increase the achievement of the students. So we have to work together to be able to do that effectively.
Hey Tim, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Thanks for coming back. I think in our conversation before, we talked about Milton's smallness and how that can be an advantage. I think we kind of all agreed on that, but I was curious if you have any feedback on how exactly that you think that could be an advantage?
Sure. I worked for 6 years in a district that was similar size to Milton. And, I think I mentioned the last time, at least to the board, that the role that I had in that, position, even though technically it was the same title, was very different than in other districts because, you sort of have to perhaps work together to be able to reach the same goal as opposed to having, many more sort of siloed positions like in bigger districts. But I do think that in the smaller districts, there are advantages and things that you can capitalize on to be able to get there, to be able to support students. You know, I think one of the things that I noticed when I was in that district is you have a greater opportunity to collaborate amongst, you know, amongst teachers. There is, sometimes it can be challenging with scheduling and you have to sort of figure that piece out. But it's even more important to be able to sort of, with intentionality, to be able to create that collaborative time. Because oftentimes in small schools, you know, you may be the only one in your, say, particular grade or specialty, and you don't necessarily have, you don't want to feel like they're your own island. So I think it's important and essential that you bring those people together to be able to collaborate. I think you can also work more also intentionally around aligning, you know, instructional practices, where if you have that time together, you can talk about sort of the sort of sequential and aligned nature of the curriculum, and, you know, how do we sort of create a curriculum map, so to speak, amongst ourselves, so that we know that we're going through grade 3, here are the minimum expectations that we have. So we're ultimately creating a pathway that's effective for students. I think the other thing that's an advantage is that you can sort of have, you know, less sort of issues with sort of transitions between levels of faculty, as opposed to 3 or 4 different transitions that a student may have. You only have the one between the elementary and the middle high. But you have that opportunity with a smaller number of people to be able to work together on what that transition will look like. Because again, if we can make that transition as easy as possible, then, you know, we're minimizing the time lost on the transitions that we build in. And I think for me, the most important thing, and what I found in being able to work with sort of that smaller, more intimate setting and smaller number of staff, is that you can sort of differentiate and sort of personalize professional development better. I know where I am now, which is a much larger system, even though you can do all of those things, it's much more difficult when you have the breadth of, you know, the size of the staff. So when you have a smaller staff, you can look more carefully at where are people at and what do people specifically need in terms of that sort of institutional support, and how we provide it in an effective way that, you know, supports all of that stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Tim, I know you worked in Claremont,
I think,
small school with a high sped population.
yeah.
And working in such a small school population, I think it's important that our teachers have, the morale of the teachers be lifted up. How would you go about working with our teachers to lift their morale?
You know, I think one of the ways that I have felt that, you know, and it's not necessarily a matter of sort of recognition in the sense of, you know, providing things necessarily, although to the extent we can, obviously that's helpful. But I think as much as we can highlight, you know, all of the good things that are going on, I think, you know, so often when, you know, it may be a struggling community, that there's just so much focus on what needs to be better. And I think, and this is part of when you create sort of a vision for the district, is that you know, start first and foremost, which is what are you proud about your system? You know, what are you proud about the school? What are you proud about the district? And from there, what are the things that you want to see that would even increase that? But I do think that It can be just little things, but as much as we try to support staff and sort of catch, you know, in the sense like we do sometimes with students where, you know, catch people being good, like, and doing the things that we want them to be doing, and when you see positive outcomes for kids, then the more that we can highlight that, you know, the more that, you know, it's a relatively simple thing, but I think it doesn't happen as often for sure.
Okay, and the second part of that is, being in a small school, you have students, they tend to have feel more connectedness. The problem that we have is, we have no activities for the kids to do outside of school, and we have very few activities here. What types of activities do you think would possibly work well here in our district?
You know, and I think, you know, there's such budget implications oftentimes when you talk about systemizing of when you talk about lots of activities, particularly things like athletics. But there are ways that, you know, we can get staff involved. I think, you know, that oftentimes if you could leverage the expertise and the passions of those who are here, or maybe community members as well, to be able to do, even if it's like some kind of an after-school club, to be able to, you know, pull people in and get them excited about something. You know, I think it can, again, practice the morale. It can help the morale of staff, but it also can help, you know, the students, because then they have some other kind of potential outlet that they can use to do something that makes them excited, where, you know, oftentimes kids, certainly some kids that struggle in school, it's hard to sort of find that, you know, connection for them and that catch. And sometimes it's things that are not necessarily connected to the academics or the curriculum, but it's some other kind of interest that students have. So we can find ways, even if it's sort of bits at a time, to be able to do some of those activities by engaging our staff in the community. I think that can go along with it.
And finally, your feeling towards giving teachers a little bit of autonomy to have more of a hands-on approach with their learning, rather than just using the cookie-cutter curriculums. What does your feel about having teachers use more of their own inspiration to get across the same what they have to be taught, but not handing out papers all day?
Right, and I think, you know, for me, you know, the curriculum and the standards are what they are, and, you know, those are ultimately the endpoints or the outcomes that we want to see for kids. But the instructional practices that happen in the classroom, you know, there should be flexibility that staff have to be able to, you know, get to the same outcome, but they can do it in different ways. You know, I'm very much a proponent of, you know, different learning styles, sort of incorporating different learning styles into your instruction. So whether or not it be visual schedules for those who, you know, who have visual needs, or learn best visually, but being able to have kids get up and move around and do sort of active body ways of learning. You know, particularly the younger they are, the more they need that body movement, and they learn through play. So I think we definitely need to be able to give the flexibility to teachers to be able to reach that endpoint. But I think there are some, you know, through aligning and through identifying what those curriculum standards are, you know, there is flexibility in the standards, but you can certainly have all sorts of ways to be able to get to the same.
One more, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll put it up with. Okay, now in terms of the BA position, you have experience working with budgets, being a special ed director. But you also would be coming with a mentor, correct?
Correct.
That would help you with the transition.
Yes.
Okay, and this person has substantial experience?
Yes. So the person that sort of sort of in anticipation of this, you know, I reached out to, a colleague of mine who I worked with, both in Claremont and in Lebanon. And he's been a business administrator for 10 years, so he has extensive experience. And he and I have worked closely together for probably 8 of those 10 years, in the roles that we were in. So, you know, he's already, said that he would be happy to mentor me. And, you know, we obviously would need to, sort of jointly decide what does that mentorship look like. What kinds of things, would be a focus of that mentorship, you know, how much time, all this involved, all of those things, we would need to work out, but he, said that he was honored to be asked and would love to do that, so, I'm ready to work with him, jump right in and work with him and figuring out what are those pieces that, that I, you know, can focus my efforts on in terms of growing.
Thank you. And you feel comfortable enough that you could do that while sort of simultaneously taking care of all the responsibilities of superintendent, but also just like carrying that vision forward, you know?
I do think, because, you know, as I was sort of thinking about that, I you know, other than, and, you know, I've been in central offices long enough to know that, so many of the things that, superintendents do, you know, sort of cross over to business-related items, whether it's, you know, you talk about facilities or transportation, you know, food service, all of those things which are typically sort of business office, areas, you know, are things that, you know, superintendents directly involve themselves with, because of, you know, whether it's contracting services, you know, or any of those, you know, I think so a lot of that role, I think there is overlap. Certainly there are distinct aspects of the job that would need their own focus. So, you know, I would need to work at, sort of what does that balance look like? I mean, I think the job would certainly be demanding, but I think it would be manageable, again, with the support of a mentor, and, you know, figuring out how do I work at both aspects of the job, you know, so that both are getting the attention they need.
Yeah.
You, have a kind of a piggyback on the business admin side of it, and you talked about the mentorship and things like that. Do you also, have you looked into the certification? Do you have a plan to tackle that?
So I have, and, I do know that, and actually in working with, this particular business administrator that would be the mentor, he actually, I don't think he did the entire program, but I know that the New Hampshire Business Administrators Association, APCO, a few years ago, sort of created a pathway, because they were looking at, you know, having a severe shortage of EAs, but there were people that were coming from the business world, which is not where the school experience. And so they created this sort of pathway of sort of how you get there. So I do know what the competencies for that are, you know, and I also know that there are some things that within my postgraduate program that may sort of allow me to pass by certain things. But I do know that there's that pathway that I can investigate further to figure out sort of where do I fall and what I need to do, but I am aware of that.
Peg? I'm sorry, were you done, Abby?
Thanks.
Peg?
Okay, I guess my biggest concern is the business administrator position. I am the school board rep on the budget committee, so I have worked very, very closely with the current business administrator, really trying to understand not just the outflow and the inflow and all of the grants, but, you know, the budget process, et cetera, et cetera. And I know you kind of mentioned a little bit about the your financial knowledge, a mentor. I mean, I think time allowed to help you. I mean, is this person planning on coming here? and spending time with you, doing everything over the phone. I mean, I need you, please, to talk a little bit more about exactly how you are going to be handling taking over the business administrator position, because it's an awful lot involved, you know, state required reports that need to go out, blah, 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 okay? So, anyway.
So, I mean, in reference to what that mentorship would look like, you know, I would have to talk further with him, because I don't really know, you know, we obviously would have to find a balance of what would work for him as well as what would work for me. But, you know, I know he's committed to helping me in whatever way I can. You know, when it regards to, you know, I'm the first one to, in the interest of transparency, to say, obviously that's not my background. You know, I've spent a lot of years working with the financial aspects of the jobs that I've been doing, and so I feel, you know, very comfortable and proficient with developing budgets. And I certainly have, you know, been a part of doing some of the business administrator reporting in the sense of what's connected to special education, for instance, things like maintenance of effort, excess costs, all of those things I work jointly with him on. And part of it was that you know, in some places the business administrator just does that, but I was interested just for my own knowledge base to be able to do it with him, because I wanted to gain the understanding of what it all means and how we accomplish that. So I've also, you know, worked with him at least from the aspect of the special education part of it, you know, gathering information for the DOE 25, which is, you know, is the massive annual report, financial report that has to be submitted to the DRA. So again, I'm not here to say that I don't have learning to do, because I do know that there is learning to do, but I also know that that the financial aspects of things, certainly in my role that I've been in, has been a real interest of mine. And so that's part of what excites me about this role, is that, you know, I can learn a whole new skill set that, or at least build on the foundational skills that I already have, but build on them and be able to take a new direction. So, you know, I'm certainly committed to working out that relationship with him, so that I can do my job.
All right, so special ed, you obviously are very familiar with the IDEA grants and any other grants, and
I also have worked with other entitlement grants other than IDEA, as my role has sort of morphed over the years, because when I started as a special ed administrator, I was just a special ed administrator, but then other sort of responsibilities got added on. So, you know, I've been a part of overseeing and writing Title I grants. I've been a part of writing Title III grants for ELL students. In Lebanon, I was the co-chair of the professional development committee, and so we talked a lot about how we would use the grants such as like Title IIA and Title IV. So I have, you know, vast experience with all of those grants, and, you know, that aspect of sort of the financial side of things is probably what I can say right here I feel the most.
okay, thank you.
Having worked in very small districts similar to this, and then working now in a larger district, there's a big difference. And in the smaller districts, you've had to take on different roles, as you said. How would you handle, and I'm sure you've had to handle this, the backlash from the community over the budgets, when then, especially at voting season? It can be very contentious.
Yeah, it can, because you know, one of the things that I have experienced as one of the main differences when it comes to budgets and expenses and revenues is that, you know, there's very little room for error when you're in a small district. So, you know, in large districts, like the one I'm in now, oftentimes if there is a significant cost that we're not anticipating, you know, oftentimes it can just sort of be absorbed a lot of times within, you know, the greater bottom line, and it's a lot easier to do that. Where when I was working in the smaller district, it didn't take much for there to be, you know, the potential of, you know, financial upheaval, because of something like that. And, you know, I think one of the things that I have always made sure that I do, particularly in special education where, I would say a lot of those, unanticipated costs come from, so I'm certainly used to that, is that, you know, within the realm of making sure, as long as it's not breaching confidentiality, which of course is it can be a real issue in a small district, is that you really need to be transparent. You need to be transparent with the school community, you need to be transparent with the larger community about what the situation is, and how do we work to solve it. You know, I think one of the things that we got at one point really close to having to do, but fortunately didn't have to, was doing a deficit appropriation, where we had to go, we had the potential of having to go back to the community and ask for more money, to sort of meet the need. Fortunately, we were able to solve that problem internally before it got to that stage. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, there's really no way to ease the situation other than you be honest about it, and you have to bring the resources together, the human resources together to solve whatever the problem is.
And then, like, you live in Alton, so being physically located in our district on a regular basis, it would not be a problem.
Not at all. Not at all. It's about 25 minutes, so it's not at all that distance. So I leave here.
And the other one is, our chairman of the board has been known to text you, superintendent, at 2 a.m. in the morning. Does that upset you?
Well, if I just put it on, you know, do not disturb, then it would be a problem. But no, I know that in the role of superintendent, you know, there's really, as much as you'd like there to be, there's really no off. I mean, there are things that come up, there are emergencies that come up, there are discussions that need to happen at any given time, and so, you know, I'm prepared for that kind of a role.
That kind of commitment.
Yes.
I have sometimes I come up with ideas that aren't so bright. Say if I come to you with that idea and it's not a bright idea, would you have any problem telling me that it's not a bright idea?
Well, I'm sure I could come up with a probably more creative way of saying that it's not a bright idea. But as much as I would definitely say to you that there are no, you know, dumb ideas. And I've said this to lots of people. There are no dumb ideas. There's always room for discussion about something. But, you know, just like I think you said the last time, you know, you're one member of the board. And so ultimately the decision is that of the group. But there's nothing to say that we can't, you know, that's where innovation happens, is, you know, just sort of this idea that may come off the cuff when, at the end of the day, when you talk it through, it may just be a ridiculous idea. But at the same time, it's worth discussing. So, you know, it's worth bringing forward.
Anybody else in the audience have any questions, more questions for us? Gone. Anybody on the board?
Sure. What would you say some of your priorities are for a strong district? I mean, there's a lot of things that we all would value, but if you had to narrow it down to a few, what would be your sort of priorities?
So, you know, I think there's so many aspects of what is important in the school district in terms of it being, you know, a high-quality district. And there's so many competing priorities that obviously you can't put all efforts into any number of different things at the same time, because, you know, personally, I'm one of those who would rather take a couple of focus areas and go as deep as possible, rather than try to superficially address a bazillion ones and then not do anything well. But I do think that, you know, ensuring that, you know, we have a sort of vertically aligned curriculum, you know, from K all the way through 12, and making sure that's articulated and published, you know, that's an essential piece of knowing, again, where that academic pathway needs to be. I mentioned earlier the whole idea around, you know, collaborative planning time for staff. There needs to be time for people to be drawing on each other's, you know, strengths, to be able to sort of improve their own practice. And then one of the things that has been a focus of mine for a number of years, even though it is not in and of itself special education, but making sure that we work as an entire system to put together, you know, a tiered intervention, you know, a multi-tiered system of support, you know, whether, you know, both from an academic standpoint and a behavioral standpoint, because ultimately, if we can intervene effectively early enough, then, you know, we talk about the rates of special education identification, although it certainly doesn't, you know, eliminate the need, but hopefully it would reduce the need and you can catch kids when you need to before it gets to the stage. And I think, lastly, one of my priorities, which also has been a passion of mine, is early education. You know, I firmly believe that if we can sort of channel as many of the resources we can into early education and build that foundation effectively in the youngest grades, then ultimately that's going to positively impact as students get older in the system. So as much as we can work at creating that positive environment at the youngest ages and do that effectively, then it will improve.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on what a positive environment would be for the early grades?
So for me, I think there is a variety of experiences that kids need to have. I think over the years, what I have seen is through all of the rounds of, you know, federal accountability that have gone through, which is sort of one of those is that, you know, if you want something else, just wait a minute, and it will come. But, I mean, I don't think what's going away is accountability in general. However, I think what that has led us to is trying to force, you know, what I would say as active academic instruction at too early an age. You know, there are ways to teach pre-academic skills and not have kids, you know, in a chair all the time at a table, paper and pencil, those kinds of things. I think there's some level of you need to get kids ready for that. So you have to have that experience to be able to be used to it when they get to 7th grade. But you have to have that balance with being able to experience their surroundings. You know, the social pragmatics of, you know, playing with each other, you know, going from parallel play to playing with each other. So much of what's learned at that age is learned through, you know, not, you know, the traditional academic approach. So, you know, finding a way to, you know, insert as many of those experiences as we can is gonna benefit you.
What would you define as early education, I guess, too? Like, what grades are you sort of referring to when you say this?
So certainly, obviously, pre-K and K, I would say, you know, I would say that would probably go up to 1st grade. I would say, you know, at least through 1st grade, but you know, I think this first grade is where it starts to sort of transition from, you know, students, learning pre-academic skills to really learning sort of as you go through first grade, you know, more consistently learning to read and those kinds of things, where you sort of make that transition. But I would say certainly from, you know, preschool K to 1. That's what I would bring that.
Thank you.
I have a question, and I didn't ask it to the last candidate, but what if you had a gifted child that came into the system, or you had a gifted child? Would you have any problem moving that child up in grade-wise?
So I think there are different ways that you can address, you know, the needs of, you know, a accelerated student. I think obviously one way is potentially to move them grades, but there are oftentimes social implications of that may not be the right fit for that student. So, you know, I've seen, you know, it takes some creativity and it takes some, you know, planning, but I think I've seen in teams of teachers sort of working out a schedule where they do sort of creative grouping, where, you know, you may have, even within the same grade, you may have students, you know, at a particular time, you know, go for sort of a more accelerated approach to a particular subject with X teacher, and then, you know, other teachers, and it's one of those, it's similar to sort of an intervention model where, you know, it's most helpful to have sort of an all hands on deck kind of thing, where you have all people sort of working together, so you can have those differentiated groups. So, you know, it sometimes depends on how accelerated that student is, you know, because if it's sort of multiple grades above, that may be more difficult to just sort of do within that sort of structure I was describing. But certainly depending on all of the factors that make that child who they are, if moving them up is the right move, then I would support that.
The offer's still out in the audience if they have any questions. I have no problem. Go ahead.
That's good, again. How would you prioritize moving towards competency-based education? We're in a very, I've come from a lot of progressive districts I've previously worked at, where at least they had standards-based grading, like 10, 15 years ago. We're in a traditional grading scale, which I think lends itself to what looks like a higher failure rate, which shouldn't be. But even 5, 10 years ago, districts have started the exploratory stage of looking at competency-based, where kids, there's a myriad of ways to demonstrate the mastery of skills, which I think would lend itself that our district that is not as failing as it, you know, really is. And grades are antiquated, and what's an A to me wouldn't be an A to you, and so it's hard for parents, and it's just, it doesn't work nowadays. But we haven't even started as a district to explore that, look at UDL, you know, with the state, because there's so much out there for grants to look at, and how would you go about trying to start, you know, the grassroots effort of moving towards competency-based, because we're way behind.
Well, and I do agree that, you know, that I've been in districts where sort of that process has been going on. And if anything I've learned from those experiences, one is, you know, it is one of those things that you have to be sort of all in. Like, you have to sort of build the understanding of what it is and what it can do for students. But then sort of when you go in a direction, you really need to be committed to that, because, you know, you can't live in multiple worlds, or you can't live in multiple worlds for very long. So I do think that there's value in, you know, a couple of different ways. It depends on sort of what the system is ready for, and so some of it would be establishing what the readiness is on a level, but in a sense, you just mentioned that, you know, standards-based is sort of, in a sense, one step towards competency-based, and, you know, I think think in systems where you sort of need to start from scratch and you need to start from the beginning, that's one way that I think can be sort of a palatable transition, is looking at how do we start with establishing what are the standards, how do we report on them, how do we assess on them, how do we report on them. And I think that is certainly a first step. I actually worked with not the district, but a previous district around UDL, and it's another one of those. I think that with UDL, it's a way that actually you can get there with addressing more than just the standards or the competencies in itself, because it's actually addressing the whole big picture. It's addressing instructional practices. It's addressing those other pieces. You know, I have felt strongly about UDL, and actually I sort of started that process with the Lebanon School District. You know, I filled out an application for the district to participate in the Department of Ed's sort of UDL process, which meant, you know,
Just UDL is Universal Design Guidelines.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, there were large, sort of get-togethers, that were facilitated, but there were also, regular coaching sessions where folks would come in and they would work with our teachers on what are those instructional practices, because if you get there with the instructional practices, then you get there with how do we assess those. And that was sort of the doorway into starting to talk about competency-based. But is it, you know, it's a very long process, one that I would be in support of going down that road, but it would be a, you know, a fairly large undertaking, but worthwhile.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anywhere?
Could you, in pursuit of that, because I'm a strong believer that test scores do not measure a child's academic knowledge. It doesn't measure a school system, based on sitting for a couple hours on one day. So how strongly would you be willing to pursue something more on what we just discussed?
Universal Design for Learning.
Yes, but competency and things along those lines.
I mean, I think ultimately it's the way to go. I mean, I will speak specifically about UDL because, you know, it's the framework within a way that you can sort of get to that sort of standards-based and competency-based. And essentially the idea is that you're looking for mastery in learners. You know, you're not looking for sort of some artificial measure of how they've, you know, taken in the information and been able to demonstrate it. That you basically are sort of, you're creating an environment where they can sort of chart their own path, and they can figure out what are the ways that they can identify who they are as a learner and be able to then take that information and sort of capitalize on where their strengths are to sort of build on their, from a needs perspective. And you're sort of teaching, in a sense, you're teaching for those who are on sort of the periphery. You're sort of guiding your instruction to sort of the more specific needs. And by doing so, you're sort of including, like you're then creating an environment where all of those learners can sort of shine, because they're able to figure out what it is they need themselves, rather than sort of being told, this is what you need. So it is, I mean, it's to me, it's very innovative and it's very student-centered. And you know, I started that process, as I said, in Lebanon, and went through the first 2 years of that journey. And, you know, I would be excited at the opportunity to be able to sort of bring that. So that was the choice that want to say.
I actually have a follow-up to Melissa, I think it was Melissa that asked that, right? Last question. I am familiar, have worked with competency-based grading, and, yeah, I mean, it's fine. However, the state test scores and the national test scores and all of that, and we're still talking apples and oranges. And I know teaching to the test is taboo, but that test and those test results are what we are looked upon as a good school, bad school, needing improvement, blah, blah, blah. So can you talk about that a little bit and plans to fix that, please?
Well, and I think for me, and one of the pitfalls, like when I was in Claremont, I came in at a time where they were sort of in the middle of a competency-based. And one of the, I think the lessons learned, and it basically what ended up happening was, it ended up fizzling out. And I think part of the reason why it did is because they sort of started with, what is the grading and reporting? And I think ultimately you sort of miss the boat when you start with simply what is put out there in terms of the assessment room and measurement. And you needed to sort of back up and really focus on the instructional practices and focus on what are the ways that we can, in a classroom setting, what are the ways that we can assess students in, you know, a multitude of ways, that ultimately, if we can give them the skills, even if it's, you know, regardless of how that's assessed, if they have the skills, that when it comes to that high-stakes test, they're going to be able to demonstrate those skills. And I think part of the reason why schools get stuck is having to focus on, you know, the test being the endpoint. And I understand it's an important test, but the test really isn't in the endpoint. The endpoint is the students gaining the skills. And I think if we focus on the instructional practices as a focal point and look at how do we allow those students to be able to use their unique approaches that all students have, to be able to gain those skills and fostering that, then ultimately, at the end of the day, those test scores will go up.
Tim, thank you very much for coming in.
I appreciate it.
Do you know how to get out?
I do.
Okay, all right.
Good, that was part of the interview. I had to be escorted, so.
So Mark, at least I came back the second time and I'll figure it out.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Bye, thank you.
Jen?
Okay, we want to take a 10-minute recess before we go into non-public. At my age, need a 10-minute break at my age.
All right, we'll allow it.
Well, my question is,
10-minute.
Wait, I'll make a motion to take a 10-minute.
oh, goodness. My question is that non-public, are they gonna be here? Well, then can we give them a moment to express their thoughts?
I have no problem listening to them.
Yes.
I mean, we have them here to ask questions. It would be
No pressure.
relevant to hear your thoughts.
So we're not gonna be part of the second decision? I'm just wondering this process.
We go non-public and then everybody leaves.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to be brutally honest,
Yeah.
because this is, you know, a big decision, so.
So the first, candidate for me seemed a little bit more superficial. I don't think it would be a great fit for this district. That's just my feel. We need somebody here that's ready to jump in, get their hands dirty, and has experience with a comparable district like we were. So in that aspect, I would say, obviously, Claremont and Lebanon are comparable districts, and as far as their needs, their communities, their students. So for me, the second candidate has already a better understanding of Milton students and some of our needs. Obviously, the business administrator, that to me seems a separate entity and animal. That, I'm sure for you guys, that seems a huge priority, dealing with, you know, the budgetary needs in the community. But from our standpoint, from a staff, our needs are curriculum, you know, student needs, staffing needs, like all of these are huge priorities to us. And I don't know that anyone could take on that much responsibility because they're all priorities, you know, and I think somebody alluded to that. But, for me, I think the second candidate, just because of having an experience with a similar type of district with those needs and what we need right now. And also, you know, he seems he's still willing to dig in to the hard work that we have ahead of us. You know, we have years of looking at still exploring how to get from, you know, traditional grading to standards-based to competency. And it really is, it's a 3 to 5 year job, just moving community and moving schools in that district. Why not? That's helpful.
Thank you.
So,
For me, I am really concerned at the dual job. I don't think either candidate has any idea the business aspect and how much of that will take away from the actual curriculum work and the work that we need dealing with our students. Financial is, not that financial doesn't deal with the students, but we need somebody who is gonna take and lead us and help us with the curriculum, help us, you know, align it K or pre-K through 12. I mean, we've been looking at that for years and we just never get there. And we really need to get there. And I think that trying to combine both positions is not gonna do justice to either position. I really think you're splitting hairs, and I think, you know, neither one has had really experience doing that. And to be honest with you, I came here thinking that both of these had certification in both areas. And to kind of hear that it's not that way, I'm a little disappointed, because that's what I was kind of led to believe, that that's what we were looking for, and that's why, you know, we were interviewing these people, that they had those qualifications. I know the second candidate doesn't really have, I don't think, superintendent experience, but he does understand, I think, being a special ed coordinator has given him some of those, you know, actual educational things that we need. I think he is a little bit stronger. The other candidate was, I think, I took it because I didn't see it chronologically on paper, and I'm kind of a visual kind of person. You should see, like, the resume of how he went, and I'm not sure that he has had a lot of experience as a superintendent and trying to learn that business aspect and try to take off with the superintendent aspect. I just think we need somebody who's gonna lead us and help.
My thoughts on the candidate, the first candidate, my concern is he's also, neither one is qualified for the DA position, but he's also talking about finishing his certification, so he's going to be doing superintendent, BA, and going to school at the same time. I'm just a little concerned, how, does he have a magic ball where he has more time than we do? Because that's going to take up some of his time. The second candidate, like Marianne said, seems to have a good grip on special education kind of needs. And when we kind of have a high population of our kiddos who do receive services, we might have a better handle on that than perhaps the first candidate. That's just my kind of feeling with the two.
While you're hiding, I can't see you.
So like, is Jan coming next? Because we have Elizabeth I waiting, ready to take the throne. We have Merlin in the business office. We're all set. I think to ask two very, very difficult jobs of either one of these guys, is beyond the scope of reason for a human capacity to do stuff. I mean, what Nate does every day is not easily duplicated, and
This is
how
not
much.
about Nate, though. This is not about Nate and what Nate does. This is the position itself, not Nate,
No, I understand.
not Nate itself.
But I think Nate's an important factor, because he already knows everything that needs to be known.
But it also
So
took,
going
Nate
from
4 years.
0 to Nate is going to take forever. And there are going to be consequences to that learning curve. And I also I feel like we have a district leader right in house, and I would suggest that that should be considered. But that is just one man's opinion. Of these two guys, I think Jerry had a good line of shit, and I like somebody who has a good line of shit. I think communication is very, very important, and I think to have a vision and get that out is something he can do, but it's gonna be done. It's gonna be close.
All right, thank you. Buddy, John, did you have, no, all set? Okay. Thank you for coming.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, everybody, thank you.
The motion? Yeah, right. I'll make a motion to take a 10-minute recess. That's what we're doing.
Got recess.
Is there a second?
I think
Let's
there's two
second me.
down there.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
10 minutes.
That's my.
That was like quick.
Okay, I need a motion to go into non-public.
Motion. Second.
Okay, that'll be under RSA 91A, 32A, B, and C.
Aye.
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 I mean to point us out, we were, okay.
Actually, gotta go to. Wildfire, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Wildfire
Okay,
lights up the.
now you need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, motion.
I thought we just did.
was-
No, that was to come out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Who seconded it? Peg?
I will.
I did.
Who first did it?
Right here.
Adjourn. Okay. Wanna go home?
Aye.
Aye.
Definitely. Aye.
Okay, thank you,
Bye.
ladies.